Knight of the Light understands his soul, refuses to play the role, never loses his child spirit. He loves to share it. He has a special gleam in his eye. He tries and tries and tries, then flies. He knows if you look, think, and act like everyone else, then you will look, think, and act like everyone else. And if you follow the way it's always been done, then you won't achieve anything more than what's already been done. That if you fit the mold, you will become the mold. He does not care what others think. He knows one day what will be inked. He talks to angels and spirit guides, an open heart with nothing to hide. He has a destiny to fulfill and knows he's got the skill, and most of all, the faith and will. His enemies thinks he does not fit the bill, so he knows he's on a lonely hill, not seen by blind men. During his long struggle, he does not expect a friend. He is lucky if he gets any support from family of any sort, but he does not live in fear or despair. He sees and hears the light and perseveres. He feels and cares. He resolves all his differences with discussion, not war. He knows if we can go to the moon, then we can feed the poor. Who has the vision of the light and from the light? The night of the light, to the light, and by the light. And so it is. And so it is. The one and only Wiz. And so it is, the one and only Wizard of Oz, not of Oz. And so it is me, the one and only God Almighty. Down there, down here, in all of your modern day reality. And you all too hearing me, the one and only God Almighty. And you all do kind of see me, the one and only God Almighty. And you all do feel me and know my son. Reality. And Peter thinks that none of you love me and adore me, even far away from me. And he doesn't understand why any human being on this God-forsaken land wouldn't love the one and only command and the one and only demand. And so I'm walking sweetie peaty pie by these apple pie trees. And Peter always loved his Grandma Grody's apple trees in West End Hartford. Don't want to drive a Ford unless I could afford not to on Connecticut. And behind the apple trees was an old antique barn from his grandmothers and grandfathers and mothers and aunts and uncles farm. And so his mother grew up on a farm with horses and cows and bow wows. And all the horses had names, and the names were posted on beautiful wooden signs, beautifully designed. And to Peter, what would be a better life for a child could dream? But he doesn't remember his mother talking about her life as a child that much to Peter, sweeter. And his father grew up in New Haven, Connecticut. And if you ask Peter, well, where'd your father live as a boy, and what did he do? What was he interested in? Where did he grow up playing? What was his favorite sport? He knows he went to University of Vermont and ran track and was in the Air Force and flew some planes. And that's all he knows. He doesn't know about any of his pains. And he doesn't know how he met his mother. And so, why am I telling you all this about Peter Sweeter, me, the one and only leader and heart bleeder? And Peter doesn't understand why I, the one and only commander and demander, say anything about him, because to him, Sweeter Peter Pell, he has nothing to do with my story of more than any glory. But me, Rover, have told them over and over. He won my human race. He won my man, if you ask Peter, unkind. Camera off, camera off. And so he won my man, unkind race. To Peter, he always tells me it's a disgrace. You created a bunch of... And then he says there's no word to describe, in your words, how despicable, deplorable, horrible, immoral you're. Those things that walk around on two legs, that have a head and arms. And Peter never knew how ugly, smugly, and fugly human beings really are until I, the one and only star of all stars, came down here like never ever before to settle the one and only God Almighty score. And he's loved this tour, this humanly impossible tour, which to him is never a war or a chore, and never ever ever, not even .00 and forever is 1% a bore.
hanging out with me, the one and only God Almighty, the one and only crown. And so me and my clown of every town around, this is how we walk around and get our exercise, our cardio for the hardy. And to Peter, it's all day, every day party-o. And so Peter was telling me telepathically as I was talking to all of you what he thinks of peoples, which we prefer to call creeples now, He said, telepathic, Daddy. And he goes, Dad. I didn't say Daddy, I said Dad. Peter thinks I say Daddy instead of Dad because it makes all you saddies and baddies more maddie. Because it's kind of more loving Daddy instead of Dad. And so if it makes all of you saddy, he's gladdy. He loves the way I drive all of you more than any baddie. But he's not stupid more than any Cupid. He knows there's gotta be kids that love me and adore me. And even like he, sweetie, Petey. Because more than obviously that wake me up video, that prettier, that story, yo, about me, sweetie Pete, was obviously done more than any love king Lee. But to he, sweetie Petey, as you all know, who follow my story more than any glory, to he it's too good and way to God to be true that any of you would love me and adore me. And be interested in me and amazed and shocked and rocked, but not ticked off like the ugly and the smugly and the fugly that live in these houses, all these louses. Peter thinks all of you comprehend and understand why people would hate me coming down here in this modern day reality, that you're all smarter than him. You comprehend in your brain why people would be grim that the one and only Lord and Savior motherfucking ass would come down to take his crown from man God frauds. And Peter doesn't understand why any human being in this God-forsaken scene would want to applaud a human being and call him God. He finds it so more than any odd. And so he would love to meet some bodies, Lord child please, that love the way I tease the sleeves like my kid peas. He doesn't think any of you want to appease me. And PP doesn't know what appease means. And I tell him my lovers laugh when you hear me, the one and only, talk about Sweetie Petey and how he's not the sharpest pencil in the box. And that's Peter laughing. And everybody up here with me, the one and only, they all laugh at Peter because that's really who he is. In other words, he's a whiz at ideativity and creativity. But when it comes to grammar and vocabulary and spelling and punctuation and things like driver's licenses and registrations and insurance, he could give a he could give a flying fuck. As Gordon Platt used to say back in his young days. Peter never could be bothered by those things to him are nonsense. Pieces of paper, all part of my humanly impossible caper. I have no money really, just enough to get by. And so why would I spend my last dime on things that don't deal with food, clothing, and shelter? In other words, a registration. Does that get me anything in my mouth to eat, me peace? No, spells, no. Does that make my house look better, letter to letter? A driver's license? No, spells, no. Does it mean getting insurance? Get me any food, clothing, and shelter? All it does is cause more helter-skelter in my life. To me, it's zero strife. But his strife was po-lice, po-not nice. Cops that would always drop by. To him, literally, almost every day. And this is true, and he'll sit on a modern-day lie detector test. Peter would be driving. I wonder how many yards Tony Hill got last night. How many receptions? How about Calvin Hill? I wonder how many yards he got. All part of this humanly impossible plan. Uh-oh, look, there's a cop. Let me pull over. They're gonna come and arrest me for what? And Peter would pull his car over, and still does it to this day. Until I came along, strong like a gazillion times a gazillion King Kongs. And then he's like, come fuck with me, you motherfucker. Come feel insane, humanly impossible pain in your mainframe from my security blanket. All you insecurity officers, you make me sick. Kick after kick after kick. Years and years of years trying to cause the barbarian brothers tears. All those illegal spears. And those Malibu sheriffs. Oh my goodness, oh my godness, oh my shenanigans. Oh my shenanigans. Thank God for all those humanly impossible 11s. Sent from heaven. And all of you will meet people who hung out with Peter down there on the streets. Not really these streets. And you could ask them on a modern day lie detector test. Did you ever get in a car, out of a car? Or noticed that Peter would be doing nothing but doing what everyone else does, sitting in a car or in a house or in a movie theater. And all of a sudden Peter goes, look, 7-Eleven sent from heaven, and the clock would be rocked and clocked at 7s and 11s. Or every receipt Pete would get whenever he would go buy some eats and treats. Always adding up to 7s and 11s on those receipts, which rhymes with Pete. But it also rhymes with cheats. And so the camera was off, and Peter doesn't know where we got lost, and I was saying, not praying. Or was I praying to all of you, True Blue? I am. And Peter is too. We're praying and praying and begging you on our hands and knees. Lord, child, please. Lord, child, please. And Peter wants to get down on his knees. Lord, child, please. All of you, my lovers. From Peter, God's lovers. Please, 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 please. Tease the sleaze. Tease the sleaze. Lord, child, please. Tease the sleaze over and over. Tell them about Rover. Tell them they're all fucked, dumbstruck, and out of luck. Tell them they don't fool any of us who bust in the one and only smart, the one and only heart. Tell them how you don't understand how a human being on this God-forsaken land could hate without debate the one and only command, the one and only demand, all because of hate. Sweetie, Petey. And so Peter thinks none of you totally agree with we. In other words, he's sure that none of you are that pure. For sure, Bernard Cornfield. Peter thinks a guy like that doesn't even yield to the one and only, more than any holy field. And what about a Van Holyfield? Does he yield to me, the one and only God Almighty? Does he watch all my movies, my movies, and read all my letters, none written better? My kid Pether, he don't know. He don't know, yo. But he can tell all of you, True Blue, and not True Blue. It's all humming and coming from me. The one and only God Almighty, who created these trees and these fields and this grass, and can't believe that any of you would be crass and full of toxic gas, or is it toxic gas, just because you're insanely jealous of the skin that I, the one and only God Almighty, jumps in all the way from heaven. And so these are the kinds of things you read over and over from Rover. And so this is just a ample example to trample the despicables and the deplorables and the horribles and the ill-morables. And so we did a loversation yesterday. And Peter liked a couple of the places. And it'll all be going out. So you could see what I, the one and only, am talking about. And shouting about. And the uglies and the smugglies and the fuglies don't want you and Petey, Sweetie, and me to know they're more than any pouting about. And they are shouting inside in all their snide and pride. And when all of you glide back up here to the dear and clear with me, the one and only, all you my lovers. We'll all have a blast together, letter to letter, because you'll be able to see not only me walking Sweetie Petey right now, Wild Kapow, in the most beautiful cinematography you've ever seen, not ever seen on this God-forsaken sea, taken all the way from heaven, because we do have that technology. Believe me, the one and only God Almighty. And this is one of the things that, well, another thing that Peter can't comprehend. But he knows it's all humming and coming from me, the one and only God Almighty. And he loves the dove of love from above. And he loves when I say, the one and only God Almighty. In other words, all of you actors and actresses and producers and directors, if you were directing a movie about the one and only God Almighty, and you needed a tagline like the one and so that's Peter, and he always wonders if that's also me, the one and only leader, because Peter knows we have the same sense of humor. And what about Boomer, Asaya, sin? Is there an exclamation mark on sin? Is he grimmer than any grim? Is he like that guy Sins? Or is it Sins? Or is Sins? Or is it Sims finally simmering down for the one and only crown? Who's the one and only crown? In other words, are my Met 11 sent from heaven hard, yard after yard? In other words, if Peter listens to the song Wake Me Up, he kind of can figure out the lines that are about me, the one and only divine, and the one and only sublime. And maybe there's some about my kid, Pine. But Peter can't understand the metaphors in that. My cat in that hat. Like he can understand my lines that are so easy to comprehend, to understand. What his brain can't comprehend is all my truths that I'm telling all of you about heaven. Because they're all too good and too God to be true. But then Peter says to me, obviously, they're true, because look, you're walking me and talking me and singing through me and karateing me and beating through me. And all the humanly impossible things you do through me all day, every day. And Peter wants all of you to know that they're not his gifts and rest, not one. Not one single solitary or solitary thing that I do through his skin is sweeter Peter Powell. In other words, when you're with him, or is it with we, and you say to Petey, sweetie, Peter, do the karate. Let me tell all of you, if I, the one and only God Almighty, don't enter his skin, sweeter Peter Paladin will just be standing there, more than clear. And he thinks all of you dears and even the undears don't really comprehend our love action. And so Peter wonders if there was an election. If any of you would make the selection that you would want me, the one and only God Almighty, to stay down here before the black ball list is over, forever. Because obviously, none of you know my story of more than any glory. Maybe I will go back home, and all your home is my chrome. And Peter thinks you better explain that because they're all stupid. All these non-Cupids and even Cupids. In other words, Peter really thinks all of you that could understand those metaphors in your songs that he doesn't understand. Don't understand my simple Met 11 sent from heaven. And as you all have learned, that simplicity is sometimes hard to find, but not for me, the one and only divine, the one and only more than any kind. And Peter does tell me, the one and only, that he's kinder than me. And he doesn't say it arrogantly, and he gives me reasons. None of them sleazens, and I go, when you're right, you're right. But then Peter also says, well, if the shoe was on the other foot, and I was you, and you were me, and I knew what was going on behind the scenes with despicable, deplorable, horrible, immoral, subhuman beings, and I really wanted to tease the sleaze, maybe I would do what you're doing. Because Peter knows what's been exposed. But this is the main thing that goes on between me, the one and only king of all kings, and my humanly impossible kid, Ping. And he doesn't even comprehend that you all understand that these are his wings. But he knows that these are his wings, his humanly impossible protection. In other words, Peter walks with absolutely zero fear of my undears and unclears, and all of you dears. Believe me, the one and only, Peter knows it's true. If every Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines came to blow Peter up to smithereens, I would walk him through the bombs unharmed. Or would I fly him through the bombs unharmed? In other words, I bring all of you back to heaven, past all the stars and Jupiter and Mars in 11 minutes and 11 seconds. And so, believe me, the one and only, I'm a lot quicker than a flicker of light. And no human being can ignite like I do through the skin, and also not through the skin of sweeter Peter Powell. And Peter loves when I tell it the way it is. In other words, the more force and the more I yell and scream through him and cry. And so, you'll all find out that Peter is rather shy until he gets to know you. And Peter goes, stop talking about me. First of all, they all hate me. And number one, they love to berate me. And parade me as a nutjob, loser, which I could give a fuck about any of them and all of them. In other words, all Peter Sweeter cares about is, let's meet people who love you, the one and only leader. Let's meet people who are interested and amazed and rocked and shocked the way you talk through my vocal cords, which to all of them is a sword of sorts. And they can't deal with your humanly impossible reports and retorts. And the teeny bopper girls hurled and unfurled around this world would love to see Sweetie Petey in shorts. And that embarrasses his skin. I jump in all the way from heaven. And he says, it doesn't matter how you look. I read it in Cosmopolitan. Girls don't care how you look. They don't even care how you book. They want to know what's in your pocketbook. But they won't write that in that book of smack. Pun intended. Pun intended. All girls care about is your heart. You're one and only smart. And so if that were true, Peter would have girls lined up from here and there and everywhere. Here and there and everywhere. Because we all know one thing for sure about my kid Pure. He's the purest of them all. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? Who's the clearest of them all? Who's the nicest of them all? Ooh, that once upon a time, Peter, and Joy Paul. And so, if that were true, what it says in Cosmopolitan, written by Bill Cosby, and so that's Peter's sense of humor. In other words, you have this lady girly magazine on this godforsaken scene called Cosmopolitan. And it's written by Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby. Or maybe it's written by Mrs. Cosby. Who's Mrs. Cosby? Does anybody really know Mrs. Cosby? And I tell Peter, me, the one and only leader, all you my lovers, and some of you who like him, sweeter Peter Paul, whenever you do know that he comes in to his skin, like when he laughs, you're really interested in that because you never hear from my cat in that hat. But I can tell you that everything that rat thinks that I tell you he thinks, it's all true through and through. In other words, Peter doesn't have an ego and envy. A jealousy is unfriendly. And he's going, wait a minute, I do get jealous. In other words, before the one and only God Almighty came into my life to create zero strife. And so Peter is waiting for me to talk, but he doesn't even remember. That's how his ADD and dyslexia is. He has no idea what I was just talking about. And he goes, oh yeah. Something about something about. And so Peter doesn't think that Damon Ellie Whitkit would love to come here and do a record King studio. He doesn't think that Pink would want to come here and look at this kiss of pure unadulterated bliss as she's singing those hit songs like a gazillion times a gazillion King Kongs. What about Debbie Lovato? Would she like to do some vibrato over this pure unadulterated bliss? And Peter doesn't even know what unadulterated is. And I, the one who is, showed him over and over what it is, you know, in the dictionary, not the pictionary. But he goes, oh yeah, that's what it is. And then he forgets it. But what he doesn't forget, and this is true, every single solitary and solitary movie that we've done, you could go through them with Peter Powell and ask him, what were you thinking here? What were you thinking here? Where were you? What was the light saying? What did he tell you before the shot? He could remember every little thing. My kid Pink. And he could tell you where we were when you go through all of his clothes. Disposed. He loves those. My one and only clothes king line. To Sweetie Petey and more than any shines. And so you see how I jump around from town to town. And Peter goes, yeah, you even do it with the comedy. dramedy and parody. But Peter loved when I first came in him and I was doing at the beginning I called it a conversation. But the love, the light, the love, the bright, the one and only way down here in this modern day. And then one day I said, Peter, it's not a conversation like that. Conversations with God, that book fraud. With me, the one and only God Almighty, it's a loversation. And so sweeter Peter loved when I would do my different voices of choices. And when I first did the nonsensical, like that, like but Peter loved when I would do, do you know the new next door neighbor who lives in that ugly, modern, red, so-called barn garage over there? Mr. Skiddy, you know, over there, Mr. Skiddy. And Peter goes, that one I don't think he did. The same. But Peter knows my game, and he knows that all of you non-criminally insane know that no human being could play that flame. And so Peter doesn't understand why any of the uglies and the smugglies and fuglies, just hearing that humanly impossible fact, would end game. Would end the blackballless shame game. But I've told Peter and me, the one and only leader, the blackballless creators without debater wanted to give in to me and Peter. Within minutes, they wanted the blackballless finished. They wanted me, so Sweetie Petey on worldwide TV. And so maybe I'm lying to Peter Sweeter. But it's the only thing that makes any sense. Common sense, if you ask Peter. And so he's sure that I, the one and only pure and real-time cure, communicate through either one or more people. And I give them rules. And then the ghouls and the stools and the cruels that hear about this truth, all part of this humanly impossible spoof. They hate Peter Sweeter so much that they would never tell him what he wants to know. And many of you are wondering if anyone has told Peter anything at all. N-O spells no. A couple people have given him hints, but it's just like that video that Wake Me Up, or Damon's and Dave Pensado's blessage. Note to Peter, note to Peter. In other words, in Peter's life of zero strife, those things are just too good and too God and way too odd to be true. In other words, his brain can't comprehend it, because that would make his life too nice. That's life. And then when I tell him this girl, Pearl, A. Morgan, who's like a Morgan horse, if you ask the one and only source, and if you ask Keith, Sweetie Petey. But just like Cece in Nairobi, Peter's sure that this girl Pearl, somewhere in this world, is, and I'm not interested in Peter's sweeter and probably not interested in the one and only leader. She's probably interested in a man named Jesus as God. And so Peter thinks I take all that I say and fly. And he just listens and glistens. And goes, whatever. It doesn't matter, Dad, until the black ball list is over. For real. And Peter did like the girl who starred in that Wake Me Up video. But you see, Peter's a romantic, a gigantic romantic. Believe it or not. Him. And so when anything is romantic, in other words, when Cece was Sierra, and I'm here to clean the seas and the air, and more than obviously it's God. And he drove a Sierra truck, and he's Peter Pan, and she got a commercial where she was Wendy. Those are the things that made Peter fall in love. He didn't know her for sure. But it was those romantic things with me, the one and only. And so when they hire this girl to play me, or is it play he, or is it play we? And she's cute as a flute. To Peter, even cuter than a flute. And she didn't even have to put a sweater around her. You know, around her. You know, it's tiny like my cat in the hat. And Peter hates when I talk about that and this and this and that. But I tell him the teeny boppers that love me and like he, they like to hear about that cat in the hat and what he thinks about all this. But he likes this, but you all can't see that because this isn't a zoom lens. But there's a bunch of cow wows down there. Vermont bow wow. Vermin, Vermont. In other words, it's pretty, but the people are like the KKK back in the heyday. And there's a lot of hay here. And there's an A-frame over here. When Peter was a little boy, and he is a little boy now, but little boy meaning, you know, a short little boy. He used to like A-frames. And so this is one of the things when we go on our walk and talks, I remind Peter of things he thought about when he was a little kid. In other words, see these ugly white plastic things? This is what they put bales of hay in now, Al Capone. And Peter hates it. Because he liked it back in the day when they were beautiful bales of hay, like in Young Frankenstein. Or was it Frankenstein? And so Peter found out that they put hay in their grass, and then somehow it gets pickled, like putting a cucumber in a pickling jar. And he guesses that the cow wows like to eat that. He guesses in the winter. That's what they eat. And that's a lot of meat. And so obviously the big animals aren't cannibals. They don't even eat meat. And so there must be some scientific evidence that makes a hell of a lot of sense that protein isn't all you need to meet muscles. If feed muscles to tussle. And so no one knows the human body better than me, the creator, without debater. And no one knew more about working out than Peter Sweeter until I, the one and only leader, got down here. And Peter could never understand how these people who don't really have good physiques would get jobs training people. And then he would go look at me. Well, I'm not bragging, but I'm better letter for letter, and I know what I'm doing, and I have the goodoobadies and godabities to prove I know what I'm doing. But no one wants me to train them so I can make money. Because it is easy money, Peter would say, counting people's reps. In other words, Peter never called trainers, he called them rep counters. And he would go, well, I'm a wealthy person, and I guess I'm a lazy person, so I need to go higher, not fire. I need to hire an expensive rep counter to count my reps in the gym. And well, I need a trainer because I don't know what to do for my back, and I don't know what to do for my legs, and I don't know what to do for my arms and in my neck. And I wonder if there's any exercises for my deck. Excuse me. And so Peter sees that the camera went off, something he felt was funny. And so now we'll walk back with this Met 11 sign, 11. In other words, 44 is double 11s times 4. And then you have the 11, and 4 and 4 is 8 for Peter's more than any fate, and 4 rhymes with the one and only, forevermore. And no human being could score like me, so sweetie Petey. And 4 and 4 is 8, and add 1, it's 9, for the one and only divine, and the one and only sublime. And then the 10 is a 1 and 0, and the 1 is the one and only number 1. The one and only. God Almighty. Is there anything uglier than modern day cars? And so me and Sweetheart Peter talk about this a lot. All part of my humanly impossible plot. Peter loves watching the old movies, black and white ones. Well, number one, he thinks that acting was, well, you can't really say better, but it was, to him, different. They didn't talk like Walt Disney characters. In other words, they were characters, and they had unique voices, choices, but they didn't talk like the kid actors on Walt Disney Channel, where Peter thinks kids talk like today. In other words, they really don't sound real, and their words to Peter don't sound, in other words, listen to the Kardashian family talk, and Peter goes, what's that? There's no compassion behind the words. There's no love behind the words. It's just, what do you call that? In other words, Peter sees it and hears it, and he goes, what do you call that? It's just something that makes you want to throw up and puke. And Peter thinks the show does well because it's human interest that people could literally be that phony. And walk around like they're better letter for letter, and come off so extra pretentious and not mind that people are seeing this on worldwide TV. In other words, Peter goes, well, if I ever come off like that, in other words, first of all, Peter doesn't want to go on TV with me, the one and only, but he knows it's part of his job. And so he'll deal with it, and he knows if I just enter him and talk the whole time, that it'll be fun. And there's someone up there in a chair, and so she's waving to us, me and Sweet There Pete there. And so Peter's wondering, is she nice and the one only slice precise, or is she mean? Is she like Dr. Evil? And so every car that goes by and every person we see in a movie, a video or TV show, I tell Peter, head or heart, head or heart. Head, heart, head, heart. Head, heart. And if they're head, they're not passing their 111-year plus test. And if they're heart, they're smart and they want to chart their course with the one only source, with zero remorse. And Peter Sweeter noticed that I took away the black bags under Cece's eyes. And he noticed after that, then she seemed more relaxed and back to the way she used to be. And Peter actually was happy to hear that her songs seemed to be doing well. Pray tell, pray tell. And he doesn't understand why she doesn't go for a more pop feel like her idol Michael Jackson. In other words, if Peter was managing Cece, her career would have a different direction. And you all know that me and Peter Sweeter think that it's ridiculous to label songs. Oh, this is an R&B song because the beat has more bass. And well, it's not a rock song because we're not going to put guitars in it. Even though it'll make it sound cooler and better, we want to come off, we're Mr. R&B and Mrs. R&B. And so we can't be rock because that's light tan people's music. And then you got the rap, that's a bunch of crap in all caps, and even not in all caps. But what if it tells a great story with a great melody like Love the Way You Lie? Peter and me, the one and only leader, love the way that song flies. And all you teeny boppers, wait till you hear Sweeter Peter's rap music that he did years and years ago with his brother like no other. All produced for free, no fee by top producers back in the day. Working with the #1 music manager probably in the history of the music business, as Snoop Dogg would say in Philly. And Arsenio and Snoop, here's the scoop and the poop on Peter. And I, the one and only leader, agree. You're still separating the race. And Peter thinks that's a disgrace. Why do people separate? Because of the tone of the skin. And how come only dark tan people are brothers and sisters? When it's only one race, and so even the Chai sleaze, or is it the Chinese, or the Vietnamese, or is it the Vietnamese? Or what about the Koreans? Or are they finally Koreans? Aren't they brothers and sisters of light tan and dark tan? Those Asian skins. And so this is what still annoys Sweeter Peter Powell. And he does say to me, the one and only, maybe they're told they can't bring up anything in the verse of the universe because then I'll have the blessage, or is it a message that they're listening and glistening to the one and only King of all kings. But let me tell you, Arsenio, and let me tell you, Snoop, if Peter finds out that you could have been quoting me, the one and only God Almighty, He's no longer going to be a fan. And Sweet Peter Palpan goes, I'm sure they could give a flying fuck if I'm a fan. And this is where Peter's always stand. He's not phony. In other words, he has heroes. He loves watching Arsenio. He loves watching Snoop. But if he finds out they're not in the one and only scoop, if he sees you, he'll read you, write you, and erase you, and he'll do it without me. The one and only God Almighty. And he'll say things like, don't you get it? First of all, you're going to more than regret it. Your next 11 to 222 lifetimes are going to be sure slime for being swines. Not just towards the one only divine and one only sublime, but you're still separating the race. What a disgrace. What a disgrace. Don't you understand that dark tan mans and womans wins those gifts and rifts? And maybe next lifetime, in 100 or is it 200 years from now down here, it will be more clear. But how can it be any more clear when the one only clear and dear has been down here, giving his rules not for stools and ghouls? And so I think you're all fools if you can't jump in the right pool. And so obviously if you like that darker tan skin and you put yourselves on a higher shelf and you separate your tone of skin to other people's tones of skin, then obviously you know what the light does, what God does. And so how many lifetimes will you have the whitest skin? Well, you know there's no such thing as white skin, but it'll be pinker than any pink. And it'll probably be filled with wrinkles and crinkles. And then you'll be a gray for straying away in this modern day. And so you won't have white skin. And Peter Palpan, remember, you'll have gray skin, which rhymes with the one and only skin that God has ever jumped in from heaven. Sweet Peter Palpan, and you'll be known as a gray for straying away in this modern day from the one and only. From the one and only. And so you will be cognitive of your unworthiness and your unholiness. And so Arsenio and Snoop, you really need to think about this. You really need to think about this. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you're not allowed to talk about what I say so loud and so proud. Because as Peter wants to know, is it really that hard to understand what the one and only commander and the one and only demander is saying? In other words, it's always what me, Sweetie Petey, hated and thought. How can you separate human beings by colors? And Peter understands. And so, who am I going to call a brother like no other? When no one is like me, Sweetie Petey. Because I have a special love action with God. But I'm not going to... What? Make people throw up, be corrupt, and walk out there, look at me, I'm the greatest, because I'm with the one and only greatest like no one ever before. Nobody can soar and score like me, Sweetie Petey. Where's my brothers who have a love action with God like me? Do you see what Sweetie Petey is trying to tell all of you? But it's all me through he. But this is what he thinks. In other words, Arsenio and Snoop. This is the scoop. When Peter hears you separate the race, in other words, he was hearing Arsenio talk about Alan Thicke's son. I couldn't believe this kid. This kid was all about the niggers. This kid was all about the niggers. Well, Arsenio, all the like 10 kids are about the niggers. Cause who's holding the trigger? Who's holding the football? Who's whacking the baseball? Who's jamming the basketball? And who's throwing the football? Who's throwing the football? I will give the light tan guys some credit. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. Peter understands it's all gifts and rifts. When you come down to this planet, you reap what you sow, yo! You reap what you sow. And Peter can't think of the word unless I give it to him. In other words, how are you raised? What's the difference between being raised in an Italian family? And then you go down to the Jewish family. How are they raised? And then you go to the Japanese. Or is it the Japanese, Lord, please? Or is it the Chinese or the Chi-slees? How are they raised? But now all of a sudden when American music, or is it American entertainment, got hurled and furled around the world, what do kids want to whirl and twirl like? The one and only. The one and only. But no one could dress. Ah, they can. And so will the one and only's clothed king line be how kids dress down here in the undear and unclear? Will only I, the one and only, know and known and only flow? No. No. But Peter knows what's been exposed whenever he walks around. Cool kids, teeny boppers, they love the way he dresses. And so is Peter going to walk on TV thinking he's better letter for letter because of his clothes made by me, the one and only God Almighty? Or is he going to make all of you feel more than any comfortable? More comfortable than even Riri. That's peeping. In other words, you'll feel zero ego. Yo. What about Brad Pitt? Does Brad Pitt come off like the Kardashians when you talk to him? And then Peter watched the friend of his, Bobby Williams, and then his girlfriend to the end or not to the end. Only I, the one and only Emily, knows the answer to that. Not my cat in that hut. And he was on with a Hemingway. Is it Muriel Hemingway or is it Muriel? If Peter had to guess, it would be Muriel. If it was Muriel, that would be the cigar company. Or is it Merrill? Or is it Carol Merrill? It doesn't matter. And Peter really wanted them to come off great without debate. Because when you kind of know somebody and you see them on worldwide TV, you're kind of like, wow, well, if you're Peter, I hope they come off nice in the one only slice. I hope they don't come off pretentious and yogi fogey like. I hope they don't throw all those stupid yogi fogey lines of pure slime when the one only divine, and the one only sublime has been down here like never before to settle the one and only God Almighty score and preach the verse of the universe. That verse after verse is not perverse like all those so-called religious and spiritual, non-lyrical, definitely clerical, full of Lie King miracle books in the library, full of scary theory, when the one and only Thru berry, full of zero moral scary theories, down here in the undear to clear all those spiritual and so-called religious books up, all those more than any corrupt books with those immoral hooks, rewritten by crooks and snooks. And so Peter's just being honest. He goes, I can't believe it. I can't believe you've been down here telling everybody the way it is. If you want it good with the one and only with. And these people are saying all those esoteric bullshit lines. Even Oprah was defining God as a what? Peter and me, the one and only, wanted to throw up. And so the question is, are they allowed to talk about me and the verse of the universe? Or they're really that perverse, verse after verse? And so this is what I call how I work through the skin of sweeter Peter Pan. But he's not stupid, my Cupid. He'll find out what we're talking about. Because all I have to do is walk Peter Sweeter up to these people. And this time when the black bolus is over for PP, or is it Pulver and Rover? And we'll be with Barack Obama's Secret Service at the one and only service. And Peter won't want any bodyguards and won't want even the Secret Service. But when we go talk to the police, the not nice, or anywhere where people are going to go, I'm going to call the police on you, I'm going to call the police on you. And Peter knows I'll protect us and protect him and slam them with humanly impossible flames from whence they came. But sometimes Peter knows I'll play my what? You see, Peter knows that I've kept my word. Me, the one and only Skybird. I told him you'll never be in the street with nothing to eat. And you'll never be in jail without bail. All part of my humanly impossible tale, or as our humanly impossible tale. And so the one time I, the one only divine and one only sublime, made sweeter Peter go to jail, it was for good reason. Reason, not re-sin. It was to get sweeter Peter Pal Pin, what we call nut job money. For me, the one and only, and my more than any sunny, my more than any honey, was in this world's grandest home run. And so, of course, I, the one and only, God Almighty, down there, down here in this modern day reality, knew the psychologists and the psychiatrists and all the piss would get more than any piss because they're lost and tossed in the dreads of their heads and their tiny little pea brains, their man-created hells as well as abundant opportunity, their brain cells, their jail cells that don't swell, they don't ring the right bell, pray tell, pray tell. And so, of course, I, the one and only source, knew their report would be that Sweetie Petey's criminally insane. And he has to be locked up for the rest of his life, put on meds for the dreads of their heads. All puns intended and blended, and now send to id. And so Petey Sweetie's life is splendid. More than any splendid. And it doesn't matter how the uglies and the smuglies and the fuglies try their hardest to bend it. All those bandits who hate me, the one and only wicked, and hate he, Sweetie Petey. And you can't really see our shadow, but you can hear my flow and glow and blow by blow. And so Peter wishes we could row down one of the rivers. And the water in these rivers will make most of you shiver, because the water is almost as cold as ice. And so fall is here, as you could kind of see. The leaves are starting to change colors. And so Peter hopes the metaphor is the blackball list is going to fall in this fall. But if it doesn't fall, then Peter has a place to live in South Carolina with a guy named Mark, who's in the one and only Spark. He lives in a dark tan man and woman's neighborhood. And it's the country. C-U-N-T-T-R-E-E. Country. And me, the one and only leader, tells Peter that my lovers love the way I spell. Pray tell. Pray tell. I tell Peter that my lovers love what he loves about me, the one and only. And that's why I ask all of you to video yourselves when you watch my movies. That's not to tease the sleeves, but Peter wants to see how people react to me, the one and only God Almighty. Through He, Sweetie, Pete. And Peter really does watch the movies in awe, starring me, the one and only Paul. And he shakes his head like all of you do and goes, it's unbelievable. It's inconceivable. Dad, you're so funny. You're so cool. Your man unkind is so fucking cruel. How could they not be happy, rappy, and clappy more than any sappy, even snappy? The either one and only Pappy coming down here, doing all those rappies, all those dance kings and prance kings and karate kings and the Peter's so dyslexic and ADD. People go, okay, what are you 29 you mean the impossible things? Which makes Peter sick. Just go read the list, then come back and tell me which one isn't true, you motherfucker. And so this is our life of zero strife. And if this is a knife to any of you listening and glisten, then I could promise you you'll be fucked, dumbstruck, and out of luck when you get back home with the beer and the deer and the antelope and the lions and tigers and bears do roam, and they're cute and cuddly like doggies. And this farm is owned by a gent named Brent, a farmer in the Dell. But Peter's not sure if it's pure. And we buy our spelt flour from him. A clue that spelt is healthy and stealthy. Doesn't have notches on your belty, or notches. But to be 100% stealthy, if you want to look like my kid, I know also called healthy, you gotta walk. You can run. But to sweet the Peter Power Plant, those runs aren't fun. You don't get to talk to me. The truth is you can't telepathically talk to me. The one and all. And so we have a meeting at 1 o'clock. It's about our taxes. It's a huge part of our story that seemed to be more than any glory. And not all the people and creeples that mean my kid peoples have met. It's not even a bet that the ones we hate the most are the ones who run this town that want to roast me, sweetie, Pete. And they want to own our castle filled with the European castles, tassels. And none of them can wrestle with this humanly impossible truth. And they all know they're more than any goof. And they can't handle the way I'm spoofing them. And maybe we'll put here this scene when me and Sweeta Peter Palpin the other day went to this town manager, Mr. Adams. And I, the one only pure, and the one only real-time pure, was more than any immature for goddamn sure. And they can't stand the one and only commander and demander when I enter Sweetie Petey and I'm that immature. And they hate when I use my most godly voice of choice. And so maybe we'll put that scene here to share. And my lovers will laugh at that ugly, smugly, fugly bath. And so Peter's sure, for one thing, that they'll all have lifetime after lifetime. Lifetime's math and path and more than any God Almighty wrath that you can't even comprehend. But Peter goes, I could comprehend. I know how it is to be in the street with nothing to eat. I know how it is to live in a car or a truck with no bucks. I know how it is when your family hates your motherfucking guts. And it makes Peter wonder and blunder to be hated because God is channeling and panel king through you like no man or woman or boy or girl in the history and her story of this God of the second world. How could any human being that has an inch of nice not want to be nice to the one and only judge and the one and only jury that came down here in our undear and unclear modern day reality with all the humanly impossible scientific evidence full of zero pretense fury. Peter can't comprehend all that despicable, deplorable, horrible, immemorable fact. For all the heart he does not lack. So he's hoping I crack these town listers, and he hopes I humanly impossible crack this town manager and all the judges and fudges in this tax shelter helter-skelter case a motherfucking disgrace. And they're all insanely jealous of Peter's face, and the waist, and every other space and place in my one and only clothed king line. They hate the way I shine through my kid Pine. And so Peter can't wait without debate for the end of this tax shelter helter skelter chapter in our bookie book. He just wishes I would crack these crooks to the ground and pound and pound and pound, like I, the one and only hound, can do. But you see, I do it all in my time, the one and only divine's time, the one and only sublime's time. And Peter knows what I do. It's like if you're writing a script, if you're a great writer, and you're writing a thriller, and a double biller, and a more than any chiller. Are you going to bring the bad guys to their knees at the very beginning of the plot? Or are you going to make it get hot and hot and hot, and make it appear like the uglies and the smugglies and the evil doers are going to beat and defeat the good doer? Or is it the good doers? And Peter knows, for goddamn show, I'm not going to let people beat me and defeat me. The one and only God Almighty. And so if they win our so-called tax money that we, for all the moral, obvious reasons, deserve not to have to pay one penny. And so this is what's going on right now in this Vermont. And so Peter